Did you ask? Oh,
Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. It's fun when people are here as a guest and don't know I hit the button. So I just did that to Toby on accident. Anyway, I've got Toby Truman here from DiscountMylarBags.com. Toby, what were you before you were a Discount Mylar Bag maven?
I was purchasing manager for Dollar General Corporation.
Okay, how did you go from Dollar General to Discount Mylar Bags? I actually see some overlap in skill set here, what you do.
Do you want the long version or the short version?
You tell me, you do you.
Okay. So I'm going to do the long version because it doesn't make any sense if I don't tell you that version. So I got into prepping in around 2006. Someone handed me The Patriots, a novel of the coming collapse by James Wesley, Rawls.
Yeah.
And I've always loved post-apocalyptic. Like, I like Fallout the video games, and I like post-apocalyptic books, Thor's hammer and that kind of thing, or Lucifer's hammer. So I handed the book off to my wife. My wife read it. She's like, rolled her eyes and said, yeah, I guess we can do a little of this. And we, after about a year, founded a little mag group with some local families. And they were all so skilled. Like, we had a nurse, we had an HVAC tech who could repair anything, we had one of the maintenance techs at Dollar General who could also build or repair anything. And then there was me. And I heard you talking the other day with one of your guests about leaning into your skill set. And so I didn't have it. My best friend at the time in the group was an Eagle Scout, and he could just do anything. He could wander into the woods, and we actually got lost one time in the woods for 17 hours, and having an Eagle Scout along was definitely helpful. So I was a paper pusher. That's what I did for Dollar General. That's what I did in a lot of former lives. Like, my first job was data entry. So it's like it was just not my skill set to shoot or kill things or know what berries I could eat. What I did know how to do was buy stuff. Mm-hmm. And so at Dollar General, where my job essentially was to buy stuff cheap. Like, that's my job.
So you know how to buy stuff cheap. Not only do you know how to buy stuff, you know how to buy stuff cheap.
Yes. Correct. I was not the purchasing manager that signed off on whatever. Like, if I didn't save Dollar General money, I was not doing my job. Mm-hmm. And so when I took a long look in the mirror in relation to my prep group, we called it Survival Club. I felt weird. Like, I felt like I didn't bring to the table, and no one ever said anything to me about it, and they were all helpful and tried to help me learn things. I'm just not a hands-on guy. I don't like build birdhouses and that kind of thing. And so what I did say was, we started getting pretty serious. So we were talking about a year's worth of food for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so we were looking for the supplies to go ahead and do that. And I said, well, maybe I could buy my group stuff cheap, and that is how I can contribute. And so I went to a wholesaler for Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers, and then I went to Amazon, and I compared the difference between the two places. And I'm like, this guy's making a killing. Because at that time, there was one guy on Amazon selling Mylar bags. So it's a pretty, like you talked about, niche products yesterday. And I said, wife, can I buy some Mylar bags and try to sell them? And my wife, being the nice wife, rolled her eyes and said, Whatever, honey. Um, we've been debt free for a while. We've been paying down the house. Like we're very, very frugal people.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps with the purchasing manager thing, but it's like, we still have never had a new car.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and I took that $500 and I bought some Mylar bags from that wholesaler. And I put some up on eBay and Amazon, and I went to a lot of the survivalistboards.com, and I really just tried to fit in and figure out what people were looking for. And about a year later, so I'd been working on this project for about a year, and I think this was the day, although Google told me this was not the day, but I'm convinced it was the day. February 23rd, 2011. I am convinced Doomsday Preppers came on television.
Okay.
Have you seen it?
No, I've heard about it.
So Doomsday Prepper was the start of the mainstream survival movement in the U.S.
Okay, gotcha.
It's where it got the regular people thinking about this stuff in a bigger way.
Yeah, I'm a prepper because I'm a homesteader and I was always a prepper and had no idea. So I come at this from a totally different place than most people.
Yep. And most people do. Like I said, I read a couple of books and it got me thinking about it. It's not something I had ever thought about growing up. So the day before Doomsday Preppers comes on the television, and I'm shipping about 2 mail totes a day, which was fine. Like I was shipping 20 orders a day.
Yeah.
My goal starting the business was to make $20 a day. And that was going to be $7,000 a year, which I was going to put on our house in Hendersonville, and we were going to pay it off a whole lot sooner. It was not, I never had any designs. I had the job at Dollar General was cushy. Like I got paid well. It was, people were nice. We eat a lot of cake there. I don't know if you ever worked a corporate gig. My wife used to laugh at us so much. What'd you do today, honey? Oh, well, we had a little office party, and so that kind of, and it was seriously like that a lot of the time. The day after, I shipped 23 totes of mail.
Oh boy.
I worked. So I worked at Dollar General 8 to 5. I worked at home 5 to 1. They switched my department head around that time. And my new department head was not someone I got along with. So my previous department head, interestingly enough, was a retired Green Beret. He was Special Forces, and he really just let us do what we needed to do. Well, she did not just want to let us do what we needed to do. She wanted to, poke and say, this is what you need to do. Well, I was not good under those circumstances.
That's sign one that you might be a closet entrepreneur. You were not good under those circumstances.
Yes. And I'm going to take a little detour. So I was not a starting thing kind of guy back then. My brother passed away in around that time.
Yeah.
And my brother was brilliant. He had designed laptops in the 90s before laptops were a thing, or they were just beginning to be a thing. And he had all these wonderful ideas, but he never did anything. I finally told him, I said, Todd, I will write you a check and invest as soon as someone else writes you a check to buy whatever thing you're selling. Well, he died never having done any of his brilliant things. And I said, self, if nothing else, try one thing. And so that was part of I'm going to try this one thing and just see how it goes. And it went. And
it totally went. It went.
I was as shocked as anybody else. And so our basement was ground zero for that business for a while. We quickly outgrew that to a little rental space, warehouse space in Hendersonville. And Hendersonville being Hendersonville, I knew I needed a warehouse of our own, but could not afford a house and a warehouse in Hendersonville.
Right.
So we said, we're going to move to the country. And we
Mhm.
saw the side benefits of moving to the country. We wanted to have chickens and garden. And, well, we said we did. We're not really good at it, but we said we wanted to do these things.
Well, you've got that. You know, you've got it the way you like it.
Yes. And so here we are. I don't know if I actually answered the question of who I am.
You sort of have by telling us stories, which is actually the best way to explain who you are. Like, you can have a 3-sentence answer to that, which is great, but like we kind of see your journey. Like, you were at Dollar General, purchasing manager. You started messing around as part of your mutual assistance group in linking people with Mylar bags and other food storage solutions for less than your competitors. And as a result of happenstance, like you were lucky, Doomsday Preppers came on and you 10x'd your business because of somebody else doing something, which often happens. You were at the right place at the right time and you took advantage of it. So I think that's pretty awesome.
And I try to tell people that. So yeah, I absolutely admit blind luck had a lot to do with it. But who was it that said the harder I work, the luckier I get?
Also true. I don't know, but
and so, you know, my pithy answer to that question was I was homeless at 20, bankrupt at 30, I started my own business at 40, and I'm retired at 50.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the quick pithy journey there.
Yeah, and look, I mean, and you have a website.
Yay!
That is reasonable with a pop-up that's so
yes.
You're more than just bags now, guys. You know, it's a lot of cool stuff.
And you should go all the way over to the right to that info place because that's where people should start.
Yeah.
One of the things that really differentiates us is I want people to store food. And whether you do it through us or you do it a different way, I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
And so you can call us and we'll talk to you all about it, and we won't even try to sell you anything. Because I just believe that the less people shooting each other over food, should something bad happen, the better.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why you did so well at SRF. You were there with your product, but you were talking to people the whole time. Like, I barely got to talk to you because everybody was up in your face about like, what's this about? Why do you do it? I don't even know what all they were asking you. So Brett says hello, by the way.
Hi, Brett. How are y'all?
Yeah, so I'm still bitter about the fact that you got Chef Brett and we did not out towards the holler.
And we are greatly blessed by that. And the fact that Brett blesses me so often. Did you see what he did at Self-Reliance Fest?
No.
He brought along an entire pan of chicken nuggets for me.
Oh, for your
and my
kids?
girls. Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, we're incredibly blessed to have them here.
That's cool. Anyway, so it wasn't just luck, guys. Like, when you are in the right place at the right time and your order's 10x, going from 20 boxes to 200 boxes in one day is a big time commitment. And there's a certain amount of how fast can I get more product in that will come with that. And what Toby did was work his butt off. He just told us at 5 he started, and at 1 a.m. he went to bed, and then he was up early the next morning. And I imagine that everybody who would help you was helping you get these things going, because the worst thing that happens at that point is you can't fulfill the orders.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go somewhere else. Right?
And that's true. And luckily at that time there were not many places to go, but you're absolutely right. There were a couple. There was two large websites that their website was their main impediment to selling, whereas I would tell my customers, you can mail me a personal check and I will mail your stuff. Like, I tried to lubricate those wheels in whatever way possible. You can phone it in, you can email me, you can write me a snail mail, and I'm gonna get you some stuff.
Yeah. And that's really cool. I mean, that happened for me when I started taking cryptocurrency 5 years ago. I will take cryptocurrency. If I need to convert it to US dollars, I have learned how to do that. So if I need the US dollars, it doesn't really matter to me how you pay me, you know?
And that's something you and Brett and have talked about, and I just have not gotten there yet. I'm not super opposed to it.
Oh, we could automate that for you now if you
And it
didn't
would
want
have
it.
to be there's too much in the life going on that it would have to be automated.
Yeah, you could totally automate that. It's actually, you and I should talk about that. I'm messing with some things that automate it more right now. Okay, so your business, though, built primarily through the Amazon interface originally, right?
Yes.
So how did that go down? Like, when did you decide to go in on Amazon, and what happened there?
So I was preparing to launch the business for a couple of months ahead of time. Like I said, I knew I wanted to be communicating with other preppers before I ever tried to sell my first thing. So I was on their forums and their groups, um, and so on April 1, 2011, I shipped a box to Amazon. So they have a neat program where you ship stuff there and then they fulfill it for you.
Right.
Well,
easy peasy.
It was so not easy peasy. So I shipped this box of stuff off, and nothing happened other than a price war. So in the old days on Amazon, if something was not branded, well, you could list your thing with their thing. And so I was on with this one competitor on these listings, and he kept dropping the price and dropping the price and dropping the price and dropping the price. And I'm like, and he'd been on Amazon a couple of years. And so Amazon has algorithms that say, hey, you get some benefit for being on for a couple of years. We don't know this total nobody who's now doing this thing. And so I thought I had failed. I was like, oh, this is not good. So in 90 days, I essentially didn't sell anything on Amazon. So here's the interesting thing. There's at that time, and now just so you know, Amazon has changed things so much between then and now. E-commerce, right. It's just a completely different animal.
And it's always changing. That's what, if you're going to go in, it's going to be always changing. You're going to be always learning.
Yeah, so anything I say now, don't take that as this applies to the thing today. Well, at that time, they had a 90-day algorithm where you could not get what is known as the buy box if you had not been on Amazon for under 90 days. So on the 91st day, I sold everything. Literally everything I had at Amazon. It was, I don't know, it was probably $750 or $1,000 worth of inventory. But that hooked me. I was like, oh, I am in. Yeah. And one of the things, my competitor, he was close to pricing me out. And it was only because I stayed the course and took losses on certain things for a certain period of time. And then I went on and started making my own listings and doing my own thing, because all of the listings were pretty antiquated at that point. But I was, after that 91st day, I was all in on Amazon. Amazon is an absolute beast to work with. It has been a love-hate relationship since day one. And so for the first couple of years, it was great. Like I would ship things and it would sell. I could tell you the state of the world by the amount of stuff I sold. Our first, at the time, big day was the day of the tsunami in the Indian Ocean, wherever that was. My second big day was after the Republicans took back control of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't think that there are a lot of other side preppers, but there are. Like it's a natural inclination for everybody.
And they are at SRF, guys.
Yes, and honestly, I heard that talk you had a couple of days ago about, live and let live, and I'm a absolute firm believer in that. And so, but I could tell you what people were thinking based on our sales. And so it was a ride.
Yeah.
In 2013, I don't know how far you want me to go with this. So in 2013, we went from doing quite well to almost going bankrupt.
Why?
So Amazon was not good about protecting people's brands at that point. And so I had, by that time, the top 10 food storage listings on Amazon, Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers. Well, in 2013, 2014, I had a competitor who would change the brand, purchase the product, file a complaint that he did not get his brand, which is what he said he was purchasing. And it sounds like that kind of thing should never, ever, ever happen.
Yeah, but it does.
He ended up in 2013 and 2014 in control of 9 of those 10 listings. I was all done. I would sit in the warehouse. We were barely paying the bills. It was a time, and my wife, being my wife, like, she doesn't accept defeatism. Like, that is not,
I can see that.
that is not her nature. And so we would talk about it, and she finally kicked me in the rump, and I said, fine. I said, I'm going to try to do this again. I had sales through the website, but they were still not nearly what Amazon could push out.
Right.
And so I started focusing more on the website. I rebranded, I recreated some listings on Amazon, and again, took these brand new listings and got 3 of them into the top 10. So, like, it was annoying to be almost bankrupt. I don't know if that's the appropriate word. It was, I will say, terrifying. How's that?
Yeah.
But we never lived, and still to this day, we've never lived outside of any reasonable means.
Right.
Like, when things are flush, we don't just go buy a bunch of random things.
Right.
Like, we would rather pay off mortgages and invest in properties and do that kind of, or save it, just straight up save it. So we rebranded. And so one of the interesting things, you were talking about advertising and stuff yesterday.
Yeah.
And I say yesterday being the thing that I heard from you last.
Yeah, that was I think it was yesterday that I was talking about advertising, though. So
and so we had the same results with advertising. Advertising is terrible. But
it doesn't have to be.
No. But we early on, I changed our website from my pithy name that Bethany and I came up with, which was adviceandbeans.com.
Yeah.
As a kind of play on words. Well, Google hated it. Like, it was terrible.
Nobody knew what that meant.
No. And so we were being clever, but we call this TCBH, which is too cute by half.
Yeah.
And so I went and got discount Mylar bags. So everything that I had read says you want the name of your product in your URL. So, and I don't know, but we have almost always since that time been on the first page of Google. Not through any smart SEO on my part, but by just recognizing that I needed a better URL.
So your website probably has SOE built in because that's standard on websites now.
It does, and I typed in a bunch of stuff. I did keywords, and I did all kinds of meta tags, and over time, that has definitely saved us, because I would pay people to advertise, and I would lose sales. Like it was terrible. I paid this one company in Colorado. It was like $1,500 a month, and they had worse costs than I did in Google Ads.
Yeah.
And so I don't advertise, and I rely on this. I rely on the guy that calls me on the phone, and we can spend an hour on the phone talking. And I still have those people. Like, I still have friends that say, even if they're not prepping, they're like, "Hey, what are you doing? How are you doing?" And or I've got people that have been ordering from us since the day one, because I never wanted to. I wanted to sell things, but I never wanted to sell things to them unless it was the right thing.
Yeah.
And so we recovered. We recovered between 2014, 2015. It was still a patch. But then we moved down here to Lewisburg. We were doing quite well at that point. I had pushed those 3 listings as hard as I possibly could. And then things went pretty well. Like, we started hiring people to work in the warehouse, and it was fun. I kind of got a little burnt out. So I worked 363 days a year for 8 years. And it was hard on my family. I had twins and a bonus child that were growing up, and my daddy was working all the time.
Yeah.
Didn't get to spend the quality time with my wife that I wanted to do. And so I started hiring people so I could kind of step out and take a breath. And then COVID.
Yeah.
COVID. On my Facebook, like you saw the horror story. Like, you were there. We were all there. Like,
we were all there.
Like, that was the best year of my life.
That does not surprise me.
And not just from the business perspective. I got to spend time with my family in a way that I could not in all the years prior. But the business went absolutely bonkers. It was like a little Mylar dollar printing press, printing off $20 bills.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was like that for everybody in the space. And so I went back to work 100%. We had 7-8 bodies working. I would work 12 or 15 hours a day. Usually they didn't work more than 10 or 12, but that's still a lot for a lot of bodies when you're running 2 or 3 people prior to that. So yeah, we grew about 550% that year. But what do you do with that? Like, I've always been convinced it's way better to focus on making or saving money, because then you have less time to focus on spending it. And so we took some of that, and I did what I guess you could call it a silly, crazy thing, and I built a game store. We bought a bigger warehouse. But we're not the people, we don't like to sell things like that we have. And so the old warehouse is happily rented. You all talk about, your multiple sources of income and your residuals and all of that. They have been the best tenants I have ever had. Like, they literally call up and say, "I need you to come by and pick up this check."
That's all automated. It's just like, you have to pay through this online system or I'm not renting to you.
And I probably could do that, and I probably should do that, but
yeah,
we like going by. We like taking a look at how things are going. But this is where Amazon goes wrong. And it's not where Amazon goes wrong. It's where people and human nature happen.
Yeah.
So if you look on Amazon now, there are more off-brands by a factor of 100 to 1 than there ever have been.
Yeah.
Amazon had to protect its name brand companies.
Yeah.
Because they were falling off in the face of all of these new, smarter, SEO-based Amazon sellers.
Yeah.
Like all of the white labelers. And so all they do is they push a button and a list comes out of, here are the top 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000 things to sell on Amazon. So COVID was a double-edged sword. So it showed people that there was money in this space, even though it was just a short-term fluctuation. And so now you can't even find us on Amazon. And these are people who operate out of their living rooms.
Yeah.
These are people who are really good at making cool looking listings. Like these are people that are nice enough people, and I've talked to a couple of them. These are people that don't know anything about food storage. Like they don't know anything about prepping. They don't know anything about, honestly, a lot of them don't know anything about the product they're selling. Like it came up on a list, they found it somewhere, they bought some and put it up, and then they give it away for 6 months to get themselves 10,000 reviews, and suddenly they're the #1 listing. And so that's kind of where things fell apart at the, like, we had the greatest year ever, and luckily we invested all of that. Like we didn't, like you said, well, we don't ever do super frivolous things. We do some silly things, but
of course, you gotta have some fun.
But like I said, now you can't find us on Amazon, and so we're relying on the website primarily. I've started blogging, I've started newslettering again. So I'm always jealous of, there's a cycle for me. I'm jealous of you. I am jealous of information. I don't know what you call yourself. Information providers. So back when I was started prepping after Doomsday Prepper, and a lot of people jumped into the space, informational and product wise. I was jealous for the informational person's ability to make revenue without selling a product when my product wasn't selling. But then when I sold a lot of stuff, I was glad to be in the physical product space. And then there's people like you who are in both spaces. And I'm late, but here I am. Like I listen to y'all and I'm fascinated, and I recognize that is what we need to be doing. And so I need to, and that's what Self-Reliance Fest was. Like even my wife said, she's like, Toby, or she calls me Tobias a lot of the time. I had not heard you speak with people like that in 5 years. And she's like, I have missed that, because I love it. I love the shaking of the hands and the talking to the people, and I just need to get back to leveraging that. And so, ta-da! Here I am.
Well, while running a game store.
Well, so the game store is breaking even at best. It was not my greatest investment, but we have a building on a square in small town America. And so even if the game store goes away, we still have a pretty good investment that a lawyer or a doctor's office or somebody will say, ooh, this is it looks right out onto the courthouse. The windows look out. It's beautiful. So you live and you learn. Like that's part of the thing. You tell people all the time, a lot of your guests do. It's like, you just have to try.
You just have to try. I'm doing a video right after this to incubate duck eggs. Okay. Have I incubated duck eggs before? Yes, but I have 2 kinds of ducks. One has a 28-day incubation period. One has a 35-day incubation period. So we're two extremes in the same incubator because I don't know which egg is which.
Oh no! Oh, that's gonna be.
Yeah. So I'm like, I set it for 29 days. So the egg, the rotator stops.
Mm-hmm.
And then whoever hatches, and I'm turning it back on and hoping the other ones hatch. And if they don't, then another time I'll set it to 35 with the whole batch of eggs, and the early ones will have trouble. So,
just so you know, so we incubated one duck egg. we have a little 7-egg incubator.
Yeah,
and we incubated. we did 6 chickens and a duck.
Oops.
And they both hatched about. Well, I guess the duck hatched later. The chickens are on a 21-day cycle.
Yeah.
Here's what I will. You know this, but this was just a funny story in my life. This ducks grow at 10 times the rate of chickens. So we've got the stock tank in our house, and this duck is already
enormous.
It was horrific, and it smelled, and yes, duck had to go live somewhere else.
Yeah, I raised chickens and ducks together one time outside, and it was also horrific because they poop so much bigger too, and there was it was like all the poop, and I was like, I'm never doing this again.
And you can't keep the water clean for the chickens. It's just impossible because it wants to sit in the water, like, oh, my home. Like,
yeah, water is great.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it was.
One duck lived because they don't like to be alone.
Yes, well, so part of what we did was we have another prepper friend, and she had one duck, and so it was a perfect situation for us to give her our one duck.
Yeah.
So now the ducks were not lonely, and they were not smelling up the house and being evil.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So in your Amazon adventure, was there a moment where you were just like, screw Amazon, I'm focusing on the website, I'll still be there, and if stuff sells, gravy? Like, when did you get there?
So that probably happened earlier than probably about 2017.
Yeah.
One of the few things is I can see the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
Because Amazon, so that was not the only, like, the trademark infringement and all of that was not the only war I had with Amazon. So in the past 5 years, Amazon wants to protect themselves from every potential liability.
Yeah.
And so all of my listings would talk about preventing microbial growth and things of the nature that you can protect by protecting your food from oxygen and moisture. Right. Well, Amazon started saying, well, then you must be selling pesticides. And so they would start shutting all of my listings off. And I'm like, so then I'd go through and I would try to adjust the language to now get around this, what was perfectly legal yesterday. They're saying they're going to suspend my account today. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so that happened. And you guys probably heard, like, Amazon talked about removing all colored Mylar.
Yeah,
from,
the like Mylar thing.
The Mylar apocalypse.
Mylarcalypse.
Because they wanted to protect against drug dealers using these Mylar bags. Like, they can go to our website if they have to and and buy colored Mylar bags if they need to. Mm-hmm. And so Amazon simply became harder and harder to do business with. Yeah. And there were other instances where California would pass a law, and suddenly I need to update 150 listings to be compliant with California law. Yeah. And so I would try to do all of those things, but what would happen is it would stick in Amazon's system for 5 of those listings.
Right.
And so now I've got 145 out of 150 working. Well, then I lost 45 listings for pesticides, and I lost 40 listings. Like, I don't know that we have 20 still operational listings on Amazon. Mm-hmm. Now, I could spend all day, every day, there are not enough hours in my day to literally do what needs to be done just to keep Amazon happy. And honestly, that's not what I want to do. Like,
that's not why you do this.
That's not why I do this. Like, I love talking to people, and I love blogging and writing and doing various things. And so I just knew that I had to get off. And now, on top of all of that, with the now 10,000 brands of random Mylar people who can somehow get more reviews than they have sales, I don't know how that happens.
Yeah, you can.
And so I just said I'm going to refocus on this brand. But I'll have to tell you, Self-Reliance Fest may be the best thing that I did for this process. Your buddies at SOE.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I never understood close up and personal what a brand personality looked like. Now, I knew what a brand was and all of that, and I kind of have I was the kinder, gentler Mylar bag guy, and my brand was talking to people one-on-one. But that's hard to scale.
It's really hard to scale.
So I got home, and I started talking to my wife about this Friday and Saturday night, but I got home and went to SOE's Facebook page.
Yeah.
And I'm like, 624,000 followers.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know what they have across all their other socials. But it made me recognize that there needs to be a personality to my brand. Because there are, just like with Mylar bags, there are 10 million people selling web gear and clips and all of these things on Amazon also. And so they overcome that by being smarter.
Mm-hmm.
And they overcome that, and their attitude has 10,000 people walking around with T-shirts and stickers, and it really enlightened me on what we need to do going forward. And part of wanting to talk to you is you guys are the experts at this, and so I want to sit down with Chef Brett and Bethany, and I'd love to come out to the holler and talk to you.
I think you should come out to the holler with Chef Brett and Bethany.
Yes.
And we should do a thing. Yeah.
I think I would really like to.
That the other day, I'm like, we just need everybody here.
Yes, because I've come up with something that I'm not even going to talk about because for once in my life, I want to launch it correctly.
Okay.
Like, I do a lot of things, and I do a lot of things poorly because that's the flip side of trying.
Yeah.
Like,
you have to do something poorly before you can do it well. And Phil Allison has a quote where that's the primary concept of it. Like, it's something like that. Oh, anything that's worth doing is worth doing poorly, is what he says.
Well, I have succeeded in several things, but I have some stuff that I'd like to flesh out with you and yours, because I think it would be cool. I think it'll be cool and fun, and part of it is it has to be based on me, because I don't believe. And maybe there are obviously companies that do all kinds of things, but it's like I want to do something that's a reflection of me, because that is something I can do 110%. Where if I try to do a reflection of somebody else's thing, I'm just not going to have the buy-in there. I don't know if any of that makes sense. I'm just kind of babbling. But yes, I have some cool ideas I would love to talk to you about.
And so I think earlier you said you're sort of jealous of people like me who've monetized content. I don't think jealousy is the right word, but I don't think the English language has a good word for what you're talking about. I think you're like, yeah, I wish that was me. I wish I'd figured out how to do that. and then you're motivated to learn it. That's a whole lot different than that stupid, dirty person. You know what I'm saying? I'm so jealous. And
no, yes, please don't take that the wrong way. Like,
yeah,
like
no, I don't. But it's funny because I get that way too, right? Like right now, John Willis has upped his game a lot in the last 6 months, and I'm sitting there watching it, going, there are things where he's at where I want to be. How do I get there? And I can ask him and he'll tell me, but I'm not ready to do the work. Is the problem. Because right now I'm doing so much work that doing more work is not in my future at this time. But what I realized, it was like my epiphany moment, is I am doing too much work for things that are not moving me towards this goal. And so I'm in the middle of a giant toilet flushing activity, basically. Like I just have to let it go, flush it. And that's where I'm at. And then when I'm ready to start implementing things the way they need to be, I can ask the question. But what I know about John Willis is if I ask him outright, he's gonna be like, you got to do this. And then if I don't do it, I look like an ass. So.
and yes, and I totally get that. So one of the and it sounds like part of what you're doing,
making sure we get a link to your site up for people to see.
Discount Mylar Bags. Yes, that's us.
So 30 Day Reviews, Justin, he's a great guy. Got a great YouTube channel, guys. Go follow that.
I just read a 30-day review on something. But so one of the things that I do think I'm reasonably decent at is, so I used to blog and I used to do crappy, terrible videos. Please don't go watch them. Until I got enough sales to where all of my time was spent shipping and packing. And so for the longest time, I just owned my job. I didn't own a business. I owned my job. And that's good. I'm not saying, please don't take that as a negative. I love owning my job.
That is step one.
Yes. And so when things go bad, I spend more time on the information side. When things go good, I spend less time on the information side. Well, things were kind of slow. And so I get to spend my time doing this, which I really enjoy. Like I love writing, and I love doing, I'm not great at the videos because I don't have the natural personality for it, but
yeah, you probably have more of it. If you keep doing it, you do. Like if you go back and listen to my first podcast, I had already been doing executive training and presentations on all sorts of things and had a basic skill set there. And my first podcast still sounds like like you know, and that you just gotta push through that. Like the thing that's been best for my public speaking was doing a podcast once a week, every week for years. Because at some point, you know, there was one time I was in the middle of a podcast, my office door opens, a kitten is handed to me. And that wasn't the live one, so like that would have been a great live. And I was talking into the mic going like, why is there a kitten in my hand? And you could tell that something was off in the background. So I don't know. I think eventually just so many things have happened while you're talking. You're not phased anymore. Like, oh, I just said the wrong darn word. Guys, this is the word I meant to say. Or, oh, I just stumbled over my own mouth, because that happens too. It happens to everybody. You're like, everybody's so articulate. And it's like, no, they have editing.
and so I'm hopeful. Like we always intended to do, like, we have a green screen at one of my warehouses now. Yeah. Because like, you've been in this space for so long. It is hard to even get noticed. And sometimes the silliest, most outrageous things is what it can take to get you noticed. And so the sign on the way into SOE that my now 9-year-olds know how to read. So, but that's what I learned. And so my thought is, well, if I'm going to do a video, I could do it from the Alps, or I could do it in a dungeon because we've got the green screen, and maybe I should just. Yes, I am a nerd, 110%. And part of my new strategy is embracing what I am and what my family is.
That's what you got to do. Yeah. Isn't it freeing to be there? It's like we all had to get to 50 to be like, I'm just weird.
So that was the thing in the beginning, and it's not that I was dishonest. It was like I may have I would write blog articles about first aid and water purification and things that I had no business
Yeah.
doing. And so now I want to focus on things that I have business doing.
Yeah.
That I consider a core competency. And I I need to embrace myself to do that. So if you go to the blog, the first article I've written in 5 years is about that.
Yeah.
Is about saying like we can all prep, and I don't have to be able to kill a deer at 150 yards.
Yeah. Right. And I actually really liked that article and wanted to bring it up. I took a month off of the Self-Reliance Festival YouTube. Mm-hmm. And it's part of the launch plan. I actually want to talk about your article as one of my videos there, because I think it's a very important thing. There's a difference between survivalism, as in survivalism in the woods, and what we're talking about, which is heavily influenced by Jack Spirko, modern survivalism, where you're doing things to help increase your personal, family, and community resilience against anything that happens. And a big part of that trio is community, which you're awesome at. We're going to talk about that in a second. And that article really resounded with me. I read it and I was like, I hope he didn't think that what we're doing there is learning how to eat grubs off of logs, because there's probably going to be an eat grubs off of logs demo at the next SRF, because we are also trying to show people like this is how you do something you never thought you would do with your hands, which is, like the blacksmithing guy who's been there at every one, or the distilling for fuel guy is always quite popular. I want to add 20 more demos like this on this next one, because I think it's really cool to go see how to spin. Like there was somebody there with a spinning wheel spinning wool that I didn't know she was going to be there, but she taught me how to drop spindle at my house once, and I. As a part of that, I finally understood something about spinning that I didn't understand before, and I actually want to do more spinning long term. But I would never know that if I hadn't tried it. And for me, it's like relaxing. It's not that I feel like I have to spin my own wool, weave my fabric, and make a dress, which I could totally do. It would not be very pretty, but I could do it. It's not for that. It's just like reconnecting with some of those basics of how things are made are huge, I think. And then if it does turn into something that's a craft thing you can do, like for me, that's roasting coffee, then it is. I would have never been a coffee roaster had I not been like, hey, I wonder how I make these uncooked beans into cooked beans.
So if you're talking about the same lady in the colored dress on the second day, she was way at the end. So she showed my daughters, and she gave them the stuff so that overnight they could practice.
It's like a kit.
And so please don't get me wrong. Like, I love the fact that my daughters loved that.
Yeah.
Like they had the best time, and they spent 2 hours badgering her with questions. Like I am 110% in agreement. Yes, we absolutely should know where our things come from.
Yeah.
Like I was simply saying that, and one of your, I think I listened to it last week. You were talking about like you can either try to do the things you're bad at or focus on the things that you're actually good at. So yeah, I love doing things like we're putting a berm up in the backyard. We're going to be doing more shooting. Like we're going to be doing some things.
Yeah.
I just have never had skill with my hands.
Well, and this is a perfect segue. You have had skill at something, and you understand something about investment that you said earlier when you said you started the game store, and it was breaking even, which isn't the best investment. You're investing in a different kind of capital there. the capital that, or the benefit you're getting, and I'm sure that you are getting benefit from this as well as providing benefit, is relationship capital or community building capital. You have provided a place where kids can go that is not the corner drug dealer and do things that kids need to do, whatever those things are. And from what I understand, it's moved beyond that to this crazy Sunday afternoon thing that happens on your property all the time, which has required the installation of giant floodlights. So what are you doing to build community in your area? Like, guys, like, this is him embracing what he's good at and embracing his personal nerd, which we all have a personal nerd. Tell us about the community building you've done in your area.
Oh, so on more than one occasion, and it's kind of silly and kind of odd, but we've had people refer to us as a cult because it started where we went to church, and my wife asked a young woman with a young daughter to come over to our house and swim with her daughter.
It all starts with one swimming date, guys.
Sorry. I try to order my thoughts before I put all the words out there. And she said no, and no, and no, and no. For a full year, this woman said no. Not because she didn't want to, but because so often people say, come do this thing with me, and don't mean it.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's the thing to say after church, we should probably get lunch. Well, no one has any intention of going and getting lunch.
Yeah.
It's just what you say.
That was hard for me in the South. I messed that up a lot. I still do.
We don't subscribe to that. If we invite you over to our house, it is because we want to enjoy your company.
Yeah.
And so after a year, she said yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning of what we call life group.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not all churchy. Like, we have atheists and we have different denominations. Like, we're not a gang. Like, if you live in Lewisburg, you can come to life group. We've actually had, after we installed the floodlights and kids are out there LARPing, we would have people drive in and like, my kid loves that. Can he come? And we're like, yes, he can. And so I guess we started it Tam started it in 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
And it grew. And we tried all kinds of things. We tried to do a little devotional, or we tried to do a Bible study, or we were trying to fit in to whatever mold people thought we should fit into.
Yeah. How'd that go for you?
It didn't. No. Because that was okay. Other people, if you want to do that, that's okay. Our life group is for people to feel welcome. Mm-hmm. Like, we want you to come and break bread with us. Mm-hmm. And so we have people who didn't fit in at first. And one of the things about life group is we speak truth. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't fit in to, I don't want to go corpse speaky and say the culture or whatever, because that's not what I mean. But it's like, if you're abrasive, well, we would like to round some of that, because people are not used to doing this thing. Like, people will come out and it's like, well, I haven't spent more than 10 minutes with 15 people since high school.
Yeah.
And so, like, we'll have conversations, and it's like, and people can have conversations with us. Like, my wife, in speaking truth a lot, can sometimes make people cry.
Yeah.
She's made salesmen cry, and she's made customer service agents cry, but she never says anything that's untrue. So it's one of those kind of things. And so we, at one time, I think it was last summer, or it was the summer after COVID, so 21, like we had 80 people.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look on the wall behind us,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see a shield.
Yes.
Now, have you ever heard of LARPing?
I don't know what LARPing is.
You don't know? So, number one, movie recommendation, go watch Role Models. That
Okay.
will fully explain it. It's funny, it's hysterical, it's heartwarming. I don't let my girls watch it because it does have a lot of language. But
Okay.
you need to see it. LARPing is live action role playing.
Okay.
And so
it's like the SCA.
Yes, it's like the SCA, but
I used
we
to
use
be in the SCA.
Yeah, and I went to one meeting and it was too strange for me.
Yeah.
And so we use foam weapons.
Okay.
So specially designed foam, and so that on the wall behind me, it's made of foam. And so some of this stuff looks really, really great.
Yeah.
And so when I opened the game store, I had always wanted a LARP. And so I bought a bunch of these swords and these shields, and kids loved it. Like, kids started buying this stuff up. Thank you, Brett K. And so when you talk about community, I live in a small town. The biggest events in the small town are football, baseball, basketball.
Yeah.
But what do all the other kids get to do?
Right.
And so I was that kid. Like, I had to take cross country and do cross country because I had no manual dexterity, so I couldn't throw a ball, I couldn't catch a ball, or I couldn't hit a ball. But I could run. I could run like the Dickens, and it doesn't look it now, but yeah, I was quite good at that for a little while. And so we started LARPing, and we would have 20, 30, 40 kids out in the back field running around and laughing and playing and just
not doing drugs or drinking beer.
And that's the thing. And so kids don't have enough options. Like our small town specifically, like this town, we can't keep a small business open to save our lives.
Mm-hmm. There's
nothing here for youth and kids to do. And so they are welcome at my house. Mm-hmm. And we now have an active airsoft group. Sweet. And so we have 40 acres, and like I said, I'm a bad prepper, and so I don't utilize my 40 acres like I probably should. But that doesn't mean other people. Yes. Well, yeah, and so other people can. Yeah. And so I love it because these kids drive back. They have built little pallet fortifications for their airsoft. Yeah. And they are just having an absolute ball.
Airsoft, not paintball. Okay.
So just so you know,
that is different.
We did buy 14 sets of paintball gear to do paintball, but we have yet to fill our CO2 tanks. So, okay. But the goal is to absolutely do that, and there are a lot of kids and parents looking forward to the paintball on the property also. So, our thought is, if I have a thing that you need, you can use it. Mm-hmm. And that's really been our philosophy. We have a trailer that we bought to go to shows and to pull our zero turn. Well, we don't take our zero turn anywhere, and so we've had people use the trailer hundreds of times, and I'm like, that is good. Like, you talked about that, and I wrote a little note about it where you guys were talking about what is your value and what do you have to offer and all of that. And as far as I'm concerned, if I have something I'm not using and you need to use it, by all means.
Mm-hmm. So you went from Bible study to LARPing when you embraced the weird, and then 80 people showed up and started LARPing in your yard. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
it's awesome. And honestly, it's hard some days because honestly, Tam and I, when we met and through most of our dating and marriage, we didn't like people. And so and honestly, our life in 2005 was coming home from work, making dinner, and watching TV, and then going to bed in
Yeah.
separate bedrooms. You know,
Oh, one to do chores.
yes, and we could happily go back to that.
Yeah.
Like I could take my 2 girls or my 3 girls or my 4 girls and my wife, if you count my wife, and we could go back and live in that little 2-bedroom condo and be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And people get so fixated on all the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I said, life group is hard sometimes. Like when you get 40 people
And
and
you just
your
want to be
wife,
alone.
yes, your wife is doing most of the cooking and all of that. Like we take some breaks.
Yeah.
But it was the game changer for what you noticed in my post,
Mm-hmm.
because after life group, I can no longer say I'm the prepper that's going to turn people away.
Yeah.
No, it just means I need to store more food, and certain foods are dirt cheap. And so, how about instead of talking about turning people away at gunpoint, we figure out I'd rather starve together. Like I'd rather starve with people than live with this crap on my conscience.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a big change, isn't it?
It was huge because we were all that guy. We were all the ones. We were all the preppers who were like, this is ours, and if you didn't store anything yourself, well, you don't deserve to live. And I'm like, that's terrible. And I understand.
Yeah.
There are limited reasons. Please don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I'm not going to turn away kids. Like I'm not going to turn away anybody from ever showed up for life group. And part of what you said, it's the community building. We're in a rural town. And so, yeah, I might have stored a whole bunch of food, but it's like he's got fresh beef across the street. Like maybe we can
learn how to process one.
Yes,
of those.
exactly. Like let us form this community, and that's probably why small town America has a much greater chance of weathering something than not.
That's why people who are seeing what's going on now, feeling afraid about it, are moving to the country and causing real estate prices to go up because they realize more resilience is on the land. Totally natural reaction has happened multiple times in history. And when you have economic collapse and those sorts of things happen, the people in the rural areas tend to do better.
Self-sufficiency, yes.
Yeah, and it is just but an important part of that is the culture of the rural area, right? Where if you won't help somebody because you don't like them on your street, that's problematic. Like I literally have an ongoing feud that's not resolved to this day of my neighbor 3 driveways down and pointing down over using the force of government to put city water in. But if that dude needed help, I'd help him. And we don't like fight when we see each other. I just don't trust him because of some stuff he pulled during that time. I'm like, okay, I see who you are, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to help him. And when your whole community is together in a hard situation, if there are bad guys with guns coming after you, you're more likely to fend them off than if it's Nicole Sauce with a gun fending off bad guys with guns by herself.
Yes, and there are people way more equipped. We have ex-Army next to us. He's going to help us do some training. We recognize that we need more on-hand training. But yeah, that's the power of community, and I don't think without a realistic plan to reintroduce an agrarian society, there is any way to survive a collapse. And so you've seen it. All the hardcores are like, yeah, we're going to go out into the woods, and it's like, if you really want to make it, like, you need to learn to pull a plow, and you need to learn to process the meat, and you need to learn or have access to. So even though like I said, I'm terrible hands off, I have a great library of all of the pre-1900 methods of doing things.
Well, the interesting thing about something like you alluded to your pet pig is like food storage on the hook.
Uh-huh.
That's how you store meat without refrigerating it, guys. That's the best way.
Mhm.
And so the work you put into keeping the animal alive or growing grain to feed the animal is your refrigeration cost if you don't have refrigeration. Now, do I think we're going to go into a situation where we don't have any refrigeration long term? No, I don't. Is it possible? Yes, it is. And if you know how to can meats, you can store them that way. But what communities did was process an animal the whole community helped, everybody went home with some, for example. Or it was sold and the less premium parts, sold to the rich people and the less premium parts were kept. But while you can salt pork and store it for a long time, and you can cure things and you can can things, that fresh steak was only going to happen for about a week after you process the cow.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way that was happening. And so everybody could have steak one night in your whole community and the whole cow's gone. We went through a cow and a half last year here in the Holler Neighbors area. And that's because I do events here. With the lamb now, I've got half a cow and I want another half cow. I'm not sure I want another whole cow right now. So we're kind of debating. But even with that, we produce so much lamb that, it's, this next cycle, I haven't produced enough meat lamb. So we'll see. Yeah. Brett K, which is not Brett C, says, don't panic by guns and ammo, panic by SOF friends and training. Yeah. And I think there's a place for all of it. There's a balance. Like I too have been working on more of the self-defense training. I need to do more of that. And the only way to get that done is to build it, like to commit to doing it and make a place for it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And so we've always talked about, so like you said, the odds of a total grid down event occurring are very, very low.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can do the things I'm good at and use those resources to put some stuff aside, it's the type of insurance. It is literally insurance. And so, like, I don't spend 22% on my insurance. I spend like 1%.
Mm-hmm.
And so, food storage and weapons and ammunition and training. And it's like, there's a giant hierarchy that everybody has in their life of how they allocate their time and their resources. And we devote whatever period of time to being resilient in proportion to the possible risk, I guess is the way to say it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So I knew we were going to talk about prepping at some point on this call. So I love
the literature. So 1 second after, man, I bawled.
Yeah.
I bawled. I can't tell you why, but if you haven't read the book, you should go read it.
I don't read a lot of prepper stuff.
Well, so
I read murder mysteries. That's what I read. Murder mysteries and like fantasy, like witchy sort of magic-y, elfy things.
Oh, so my wife calls that vampire porn.
Yeah, totally. I mean, anything that's a good story, though, it has a good plot, I like when I'm reading fiction. So,
but 1 second after, so James Wesley Rawls is a terrible writer. He's just awful. Even what if he was the guy to start me on the journey? Yeah. So William Forstchen, who wrote 1 second after, that book puts immediacy into your thought process.
Yeah.
He has a daughter in the story that is type 1 diabetic.
Oh, and that's tough.
And there's a lot of talk about how you get that from sheep, I think, and the potential processing and how many people are just going to straight up die without refrigeration of things like insulin.
Yeah, it's funny. John Willis from Special Operations Equipment today posted a question on Facebook, and the question, I think it was John Willis.
I saw it. I did.
What wouldn't you eat if you were starving or hungry. I don't know if it was starving or
I think he
it was
said starving because there's a difference
starving.
between. There's a lot of things I won't eat when I'm hungry. There's
Yeah.
probably not anything I won't eat when I'm
The
starving.
only things I won't eat when I'm starving, and I might get so desperate I would, are the things that cause me to go to anaphylactic shock, which is going to kill me.
Same thing with me and
I was like,
alpha-gal.
there's only one thing on that list for me, probably, but it's a big thing in the prepper world that I can't eat. And, but everything else I prefer not to eat is up for debate. And then somebody was like, one time I was so hungry, I was trying to eat my belt. You know, I was like, exactly. And that's what happens when you're starving. And I was just like, either a lot of you people are lying to yourselves.
Because how many of them have ever actually been starving?
Right. Or like, you're going to die if you ever get into that situation. Because, yeah.
And so, yeah, I thought that was a great question. And it goes to the reality because, you know, part of the prepper movement and is fantasy. And like I said, I'm part of that. Like, there's a little part of me that likes, wow, yeah, it'd be great to live off the land and blah 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 and have no government. And it's like, 10 minutes into it, and I'm going to be like, yeah, I miss my TV and my like. And so at least I'm realistic, but I love the literature and the fantasy of it.
March 2020. Tornadoes rip across Tennessee, knocking out communication centers and the power. And they were near me. So we didn't have power. We didn't have communications of any kind. If I'd had ham and a generator, I could have made that work. But other than that, the only thing we could get was incoming radio. And I just woke up and it was a normal power outage. And then my cell phone didn't work. And I finally figured out by driving all the way to town that it was a regional outage. And there was no point in me messing with communications. But we had to transition from, you know, normal life, which is like my fridges and freezers are plugged in. I can turn on a light anytime I want to all the food is going to rot if we don't use the things we've done for preps. And so it was like prepper boot camp finally came. And it was like, we were all so happy. We're like, yes, we get to use the inverter and the generator. And we get to reach out to neighbors and try to help them. And what happened during that time is I developed a method whereby I had a generator. We also used the inverter and the car thing just to see. I get up in the morning and that's when the fridges and freezers could be cooled. And I'd turn the water on and do any water things that needed to be done because my water doesn't work without power. And at that time, I'd decide what the food was for the day, put it in a cooler a smaller cooler on the floor in my kitchen, close all the fridges and freezers, get them cooled down again. And then we had them insulated with blankets for the rest of the day. And then I was only, you know, risking the going bad of the food in the cooler. And I would take ice from the freezer for that, which was, So I would have never thought to do that until I had to do that. That wasn't like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have the designated food cooler in the kitchen. No, what we knew was how to cool the fridges and insulate the fridges. And we knew to go from multiple fridges to one fridge by packing everything in there so you didn't have to cool as many. That's all we knew how to do. But once you try it, you're like, oh. But yeah, it was really funny. That was awesome. That would not have been awesome for 2 months.
It would not. And so we did a couple of weekends with our mutual assistance group.
Yeah.
And so like he had the place where we did it, they had a beautiful wood stove, and the meals that were cooked on it, I could eat any day. Like, and we're talking rice and beans. We're not even talking the meat.
Yeah.
But it was a good exercise. And we also realized at 2 a.m. when he literally turned the breaker back on in order to make his popcorn, we were like, are we really as serious about this as we think we are?
Yeah.
But it was still good from the standpoint of we cooked on things that we were not used to cooking on, and we used supplies that we were not used to using. You know, you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I get this water to cook all this food in? And so it was definitely I think everybody should do it. If you are a serious prepper, you should turn off your electricity at Friday at 5 and turn it back on Monday at 6 a.m.
Yeah, and see what really happens. Yeah. Cool. Well, we've been going for more than an hour. And before we wrap up, I actually wanted to announce something. So I see a question here from Justin that is, what is the best way to figure out what size Mylar bags you need to get, particularly for larger bags of rice from the store? If only I had a sponsor who could answer that question. Hey guys, I have a new sponsor. So I invited Toby on a long time ago because I wanted to have this conversation, and we just never quite got the schedules in order. And then he chose this date for this interview, and I'm scheduled a couple months out in general interviews. And like last week, was it? He's like, by the way, can I sponsor your show? And I'm like, well, I use your product, so yes, you can sponsor my show. I know you know how to fulfill things. So I'd like to announce our new sponsor. I'm super excited to have Discount Mylar Bags as our sponsor. I think it's a great fit for the Living Free in Tennessee podcast for a couple reasons. One, it's a family-owned business that has been built from zero to hero, so to speak, to steal a phrase from Evan Dixon, the ham guy. And I like supporting that. In-network dollars help all of us, right? So if you're going to buy your Discount Mylar bags, why not support Discount Mylar Bags? And they support this podcast, which is great. But also, I know that he just does a great job, and he's in Tennessee. So he's in the United States. So you're doing business with somebody in the United States. Now, I know you source your Mylar probably from China, correct?
I do, but if you want to have another talk about why that is, I'll be glad to.
Yeah, we'll do that. I think we can have some really good talks about stuff like that. So welcome as a sponsor as well. I'm going to have you be the sponsor for today's show. We'll have that when on the podcast, audio podcast. But how do you figure out what size Mylar bag you need for a 25-pound bag of rice, for example?
So this comes from personal experience. And so my wife and I, when we were storing Mylar bags in 2007-ish, I was like, I want all these great big bags, and I'm going to put them in my buckets, and then I'm going to stack them on top of one another.
Oh, yeah, we've all made that mistake.
So
you can do 3 bucket stacks.
Yeah, we did 3. And so my wife, we would never use it. Part of it is
hard to get.
Big bags are they're hard to use for if I'm 2 people. Like, I'm never going to use, because you'll get 35 pounds of rice in a 5-gallon bucket. And so now you've opened up this giant bucket. Now you need to add another oxygen absorber. Now you need to figure out, how am I going to get this up to my kitchen to actually use? There were all kinds of logistical demands. So unless you are a specific person who knows exactly why you're using a 5-gallon bag, do not ever do that. The right size, in my opinion, for a family of, we'll call it 4, is going to be about a 2-quart bag. Because, number one, I can put rice and beans, and then I can put...
Salt.
Yes, and so you actually take a small packet of spices and you can put that in the same bucket. So when you open a bucket, now you have all of the things. You take out a reasonable portion that you're going to take to your kitchen to use in a reasonable period of time. And so I always recommend 1-gallon bags or smaller if you do not have a clan. And even if you do have a clan, because it's like 1 gallon worth of rice is still going to feed a clan. That's a lot of food. And so, yes, do not. And I told this this is what the conversation I had most often at Self-Reliance Fest. Do not buy 5-gallon bags if you don't know why you want them.
Because you can put a whole bunch of 2-quart bags or a number of them in a 5-gallon bucket if that's your storage method.
And so I will even say, buckets are simply the least space-efficient way to store things.
Correct.
So we use totes.
Yeah.
Why? Because totes stack.
Are square. They're
The
square.
totes are square, and so you actually have less airspace wasted in your tote, in your stack, and in your home. And so, we went away from buckets years ago, and so we typically will use totes and jars and
30-day
bags.
review says welcome and thanks for sponsoring. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And then Porterhouse and Teal, and I don't know if this is Porterhouse or Teal, but they said they've been buying from you for 2 years.
Oh, I am, and honestly, I mean it. I am grateful. I am well and truly blessed. I have a beautiful wife. I have a beautiful family, and yes, we do.
So the question is, do you have Mylar bags that can be used in a vacuum chamber?
Yes.
Is there something special?
So it depends. So some of the vacuum chamber sealing areas will not seal like a 7 mil bag, but all of the flat 8x12, 10x14 without a zip seal will seal in a chamber vac. Now, Mr. Chef Brett also did a great experiment for us. If I remember correctly, you can sous vide in a Mylar bag.
Oh, I've never done that. But you can, I think, okay, no, it has to be retort canning. Never mind.
Yeah, retort canning is a little different, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people try to retort can in Mylar, and that's not what you're supposed to do. You have to use a retort bag. It's a different bag. Mm-hmm. What I did to be able to seal in my chamber back, even the gusseted, zip tie ones, is I increased the time that bar is hot in there, which you can do to, I think it was 3 or 5 seconds, and then it worked. And I had to ruin some bags to figure it out. Yeah.
And that's the one of the challenges. I try to, you can burn a seal.
Yeah.
And you may not even know that you've burnt your seal, and you'll put your food away, and you're like, this is why I also recommend you must test. You must learn how to cook with the things that you've stored. You must learn. And honestly, if you can rotate, you need to do it too.
Yeah, I rotate everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't store a lot in Mylar except for my freeze-dried foods now. Mm-hmm. But even those are mostly in jars. Mm-hmm. Like I store in Mylar my freeze-dried foods. I have totes of them that I'm going to take with me on the road.
Yes.
And then
because glass is very heavy.
Yeah, glass, and it's breakable. It's very breakable. Mm-hmm. Or unless I think it's going to be around more than a year. Mm-hmm. That's sort of my filter for that. But it's a very handy thing for like my eggs that I'm going to have for 5 or 10 years. But even those, like when I'm out of eggs, I don't go to the store and buy eggs. Mm-hmm. I go look at the bags of freeze-dried eggs that I've put up, and I use those if I really want eggs.
And so now that after 14 months on the phone with Harvest Right, my freeze dryer is actually running again. Yay! So I always try to rotate. So when my freeze dryer wasn't running, I wasn't eating my food because I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to make more. But I pulled out stuff out of the bags. I actually store water in Mylar bags.
Yeah. That's a cool idea.
And so just to test the length of time, I think I've got some 5-year-old water I need to go test. But I've tested 4-year-old water, and that worked perfectly. So I don't think it's going to go bad in another year. But yeah, you should test your food. And I'll say, like, I made chili out of a Mylar bag. I can actually pour my hot water right in. I sealed it. Yep. I let it rehydrate.
That's so great on the road. I mean, that's like the best thing about the freeze dryer plus Mylar combination for me is that it's like I'm having chili. It's got all ingredients that I'm not allergic to, and at this point, I care not what they serve anywhere.
Yes, and I'm the same way, and I'm actually I put up more food than I thought when I had the freeze dryers running. Yeah, so I'm looking forward. So my wife, she bought the freeze dryer for lemons.
Yeah,
like it's the only thing she cared about. So in between lemons, I get to store my prepper food.
Yeah, is there an LFTN discount code?
Use News 5. I did not make one I thought I made one for you.
Yeah, you have one specifically for me that's in my membership portal. So if you're a member, log in.
Oh, so yeah, I would say, yeah, you should sign up for Nicole's thing so you can get the discount code.
Discount code, yeah. Yes, there is.
But otherwise, you can use News 5 as my blanket 5% off. So here's one of the things. So one of the reasons I chose the name, and this whole line may be kind of weird, but it's like, I'm not a jewelry store. And so I literally did not mark things up 7,000% so that I can give you a 50% discount later. And so, like, I actually got in real trouble. There was a very popular Facebook group where I gave the owner of the group 10%, and then she gave the group 10%, and I would essentially break even after shipping on some of these things, and I'm like, that's hard to make a living on not making a living. And so I limit the discounts because I don't jack up the prices super high.
Hence the name, Discount
Hence the name. Yes.
.com. So speaking of that, how should people follow you? Do you have a social presence yet, or like?
So I am working on all of that. So my blog is adviceandbeans.com, and I have posted my first time in 5 years. I have all kinds of things coming. I have a newsletter that you can sign up on, that little pop-up you saw on discountmylarbags.com. And so the newsletter has actually been going out pretty regularly every couple of weeks. So that was good. We are facebook.com/discountmylarbags.
Yeah, I tagged you today.
And then if you're a big freeze dryer and stuff, so, and you know the difference between a page and a group. So the Discount Mylar Bags page on Facebook, it's kind of one-sided because it's a page, and I didn't recognize that 12 years ago when I set it up. So if you go to Preservation Station Freeze Dryer and Food Storage Group, that is also us. So if you have conversations that you would like to have, I would love to get that group up and revamped and running. And then I do have Discount Mylar Bags on Twitter, have not posted on Twitter, but here's what I'm saying. I'm going to go talk to Nicole and Brett and Bethany and Tam, and we're going to sit around and hash out this thing. And then when it comes, it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun.
And so if you follow all of my stuff and just hang out for a bit, when it goes, I seriously hope I make everybody laugh and smile and buy lots of Mylar bags. But that's the side point. I'm just kidding. But anyway, so please go follow us all those places, and we're going to be more, and we have been more active on all of those places. So yes, I have a couple of conversations. If you ever want to talk again in the future, Nicole, I've got all kinds of things.
Well, we'll keep you in the rotation. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate you. Like, you and yours have totally re-energized me when it comes to doing all of this social stuff that I should have been doing all along.
Well, that's good. Glad to hear it.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Bye.